Done? Okay, we're live now. Perfect. And then I'm going to go live on the actual Facebook and go live there. All righty, so we should be good to go. So we are live on Facebook. It's just waiting for it to load. And if anyone is jumping on now, welcome on. This is going to be an awesome, awesome conversation. If you see both Christina and I, Christina. Perfect.
Yeah, it says it's streaming. Yeah.
Perfect. Awesome.
I got it. Yep.
All righty. So this is going to be very much interesting. So, one of two things, it's an interesting conversation. Number two is that this is the first time trying to do this Zoom to Facebook Live. So what I'm going to do, and I like to keep it raw and real, but professional as well, Christina, right, is that I'm going to try to open up a separate tab. I want to see the comments. That's the one thing. So if you manage, or maybe you're able to see the comments that are coming through while we're talking each, and then we can allow ourselves to
I can do that.
Okay.
Kim Booth is here. Good morning.
Good morning, Kim. Okay. Perfect.
Just give us a little love when you get on.
Yep. Go ahead and hit those hearts, likes, all the goodness that allows it to spread out to more and more people. Obviously, people can rewatch this as well. So if you're rewatching it, that's wonderful. How's your morning, Christina, first of all?
Very good. I'm ready to talk about this. This has been, you and I have been germinating about this over the past couple of days. So I'm just like chomping at the bit right now.
Yep. Okay. So I feel the same way. I think that this is a very much needed conversation. I think a lot of people have been avoiding it from both parties.
Yep.
Right. The African-American community, the white community. And I do think any other minority, ethnicity, race, they're avoiding it as well because they have their own issues, right? So it's kind of a twofold of what we all do for this. So what I want to do, because I don't want to waste anyone's time per se, but I do want to make this valuable, obviously, is that I want to go ahead and open up the conversation. And I think that each of us can really tell just a short story about ourselves if no one knows, and where we're from in that sense. So Christina, I'll let you lead it off for people who maybe not know you, and then we can dive into actually the goodness of this and the racial issues and biases.
Yeah, so I am so grateful to be here. First of all, I feel like this is a really important topic that we need to address and acknowledge because I know that it's been kind of like, for me, I grew up in a very diverse area in Copiague, New York, and hopefully some of my colleagues from my high school are watching, and that's kind of continued for me. So I've always been really immersed, and I'm grateful for that, for those experiences. My parents still live in Copiague. I'm actually going there to see them in a couple of days, and I've had those experiences of constantly being around a lot of diversity, even going to St. John's for pharmacy school and then living in Brooklyn. So from my perspective, I just was always around people of color, and I really, it was normal to me. So to have this come out and then have the words, for me, just hearing the words like white privilege, that was like a big shock to me, even as early as Monday, because I never saw myself that way because of the way that I grew up. And so I think I talked to you about it and you really broke it down. And it was just that extra layer of understanding. And that's really where I feel like I want to understand. And I feel like a lot of other people want to understand what's going on. Mm-hmm. And I think all of this, the pain and everything is coming up to be released. So, in my background as a transformation coach and a spiritual teacher, that's how I think of this, that all of this has been there. You know, all of us know that it's there. And now this is really coming up to be acknowledged and to hopefully move us forward into a place where we can be, you know, having these healthy conversations about something that has pervaded our society for centuries. So I'm just grateful to have the conversation, to answer any questions. You know, if anybody wants to ask me anything, you know, personal side conversation, I would love to just explore. I've been, you know, contacting a lot of my friends and just hearing a lot of their pain and their story. And I feel like it's so important to really just be there with people, right? Not trying to defend or be like, oh, I get it, because I will never get it. But I think it's just be standing with that person, being there with them, and just allowing them to kind of share their experience, I think is such a valuable thing for me over the last couple of days. And so, yeah, that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Yeah, yeah. No, I appreciate you sharing, and we'll deep dive a little bit more. So, guys, remember, if you have any questions, please go ahead and down and put them in the comments. You know, if you like something that's being said, if you have something that you want to add, go ahead and put it down in the comments. Go ahead and share this out with anyone. I just want to reiterate that because I do feel like this is valuable to people, and we're first thing in the morning. So I'm gonna go ahead and tell my exactly. People are like, "Oh my gosh, like I gotta listen to this harshness first thing." So I'm gonna I'm gonna go ahead and tell my side, and I think that is the side that I think a lot of people, to be honest, are trying to understand. Right? What is going on in the Black community? How do I support? What are we feeling? I've been getting a lot of Bryan, how are you texts, you know, and I can't speak for a collective necessarily because every African-American male specifically and female has various experiences of their Blackness, okay? For me, growing up in the South in Birmingham, Alabama, it was ingrained in our culture. You know, it was very much not necessarily talked about per se, but it was ingrained in Alabama history. You know, I remember opening up an Alabama history book, and that is there, right? So, you know, but for me, I grew up in a very diverse, more so as the minority, because I grew up in the suburbs of Birmingham. I didn't grow up in the inner city. Birmingham, Alabama is predominantly Black. We have a Black mayor, but I grew up in Pelham in the Hoover area, which is about 30 minutes south of Birmingham. So I was the quote unquote token Black person. You know, I had a lot of white friends growing up. I played all the sports. I was the Black guy that was, you know, was the top of the sports teams and whatnot. So it was like, you know, I can't speak if I sucked. I can't speak, just say I didn't have, you know, the intelligence. You know, I would say I was pretty smart growing up. Just say I didn't have those things in that environment. It might have been a different story, but because I was, you know, making good grades and I was playing sports well and I could like have fun with my white friends, almost the Blackness was removed in a sense. Right. So it was never talked about. It was like, oh, Bryan's the cool Black guy, you know? So maybe that instilled a good visual for my friends growing up. But as we know, racism is ingrained. Okay. Racism is ingrained in our culture via experiences and how kids are being taught and what they see. So even subconsciously, just say a parent is teaching their son or daughter, or they have these little fun side conversations at home, because I know what goes on is that the, you know, pervasive, the racial slurs come out slightly. There might be talk of somebody on the screen, and just think of a 5 or 6 year old, 10-year-old child that hears their parents talking about, you know, that they're thugs or those people are stealing or those, you know, just be careful. You know, it's one of those feelings that is ingrained in a child to when they grow up and they get, you know, a little bit older, so they start seeing, you know, the Blackness. But before, I was their friend, right? So that was kind of my experience growing up, is that, you know, things shifted slightly, you know, because I don't think this topic is being talked about. However, when I reached high school, there were instances, where I experienced somewhat of a racism, and it was never, again, it was just very, very, it was jokingly, that it would come out. It wasn't just like direct, because again, I was in the AP classes. I was told I was going to be successful. I was playing sports. I was playing golf. It's like, oh, Bryan's different. Like, he's the cool black guy. Like, so that to me didn't resonate until now, is that you're now segmenting that I'm okay, but yet you're still subconsciously have feelings towards race that are not in line with your morals and values and beliefs. So when people ask me how I am, and when you're asking how people are, and you're trying to understand that, what I would say is that flip that script of a question, because not every African American, same goes with any race or ethnicity, right? Not everyone has the same experience. So I would say flip the script and ask, what is your viewpoint on the current situation? Because now, again, you are segmenting me into that I have experienced racism in a certain way, that, I view this the same way. Yeah, I'm angry, but for me, I might take it differently. And that, again, I don't think people understand that is subconsciously putting somebody into a bucket where you might not be meaning to do it, but you did it because it's like, oh, Bryan's a black male. How are you? Like, are you okay? Can I talk about this? It's like, I understand where you're coming from, but flip the script on the question. Hey, Bryan, I'd like to learn more about this. I think that you could help. How are you feeling about the situation? What are your viewpoints? Just get a broader perspective of how you're asking the question. And so that is my kind of experience. When I went to high school, obviously college, I went to a predominantly Black institution, at HBCU. So going from diversity to a full Black experience at a high level, right? You got people there, obviously, if people don't know, that, were accepted to the Harvards and the PWIs and all these things, but decided to say, hey, I was the top of my class. I want to inject myself into a community. Then I went to a PWI. Okay, people don't know what that means, because it's a predominantly white institution, okay, for graduate school. And again, it came back up, that I was one of, I think, 15 in a class of 300 or 400 pharmacy students. So again, it came back up. I had to deal with that. Everyone's experience is different. So when I'm speaking to my counterparts or anyone who's listening, who's trying to understand how to react, and I think Christina and I are going to speak from both parties, obviously, about, what we can each do. This is not just me teaching about the African American community or the Blackness in me. We're going to be talking from both perspectives. So that was my experience. So that teaching point to me would be simply for people to understand that everybody has various experiences. It doesn't matter if, Christina didn't grow up with, we're going to talk about privilege on here. Okay. So if Christina didn't grow up with money, or she grew up, with a single family home, or, her white experience is different from somebody who came into wealth. So I think as we're trying to obviously be more inclusive, like, we have to understand that everybody, if we're going to start seeing people as individuals, we have to start seeing them as an individual and ask them before start assuming again, right? That for me, my Black experience, I still have privilege. As you heard my story, like, I still have to understand what it feels like for my Black community that grew up in the projects, that grew up with a single family home. I didn't have that. I grew up in a middle-class family, right? So it's variant, but I still know that I'm in a certain segment to people's eyes. So I still have to resonate with that no matter what. So I have a position. So obviously we want to have conversation. Christina, I'm going to open this up. And what was your first thought with when it came out? Like, obviously I think a lot of the white community had the same feeling. It's like, what do I say
Exactly.
You know, how,
So,
how was
and
that?
I feel like, yeah, part of me is like, oh my gosh, like you're in such shock, and there's so many different phases that I feel like you talk about the individual, everybody's feeling different things. Like some people are numb, some people are afraid to, they're like, well, what do I say? I don't want to offend anybody. So there's so much fear that I think is laced from the white community, that we are like, what do I say that's going to even make a difference, right? So I think the first thing that, when I reached out to you just to get that deeper understanding, I think that it's important for us to be able to have these conversations and not operate out of fear. I think that's the first thing that I would say, is that I just feel like we need to have a stance. And somebody posted, Jerika posted about this, we can't just sit here and be silent and be like, oh, it's going to pass and everything's going to be fine and it'll just go back to normal.
Mm-hmm.
These conversations, I feel like, is really what is needed to create change, to dismantle what's been going on. Because I feel like it's the silence and the not doing anything that keeps it suppressed.
Mm-hmm.
That's just from my own viewpoint, being like, all right, I feel this fear, I don't know what to do with it, who can I reach out to, what can I do in order to kind of do my part, whatever that is. I feel like you can't just sit there and not feel it. And I think part of me as a spiritual healer, I'm like, my next, so it was the shock, and then it was like, oh well, I'll just hide and retreat and like spiritual bypass, because like, oh, I'm positive, and I feel like that's a defense too. Like,
Yeah.
it's something that, I'm just going to be positive about it and not look at it. But in reality, it's suppression.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's a lot of that going on too. And I had to call myself out and be like, no, I saw a lot of truths about myself that I didn't like, and a lot of things that have come up for me personally that I think every person should look within themselves and just have that honest conversation within, right? It all starts with the individual of like, oh, okay, I'm doing this defense mechanism where I'm like, oh, well, I have Black friends. And it's like, no, it's not about that. It's really about like acknowledgement. And you and I talked about this. We must have said that word like a million times the other day. But I think just, being gentle with yourself, but also like calling yourself out in the fact that, yes, this is an important issue that needs to be acknowledged and highlighted. And that's why you and I are having this conversation.
Exactly.
So like, I think all of those elements came into play for me.
Wow. I think that's a great teaching point now, because I even had to do my due diligence of understanding. And guys, I'm taking a very much of a different approach to this. What you will see is, because I like to have kind of a microscopic viewpoint. What I am trying to do is understand why the white community is thinking the way they do, why the Black community is reacting the way they are, why everyone else is sitting on the sideline because it doesn't ultimately affect them. It seems like it's this black and white thing. It's like, if you're Hispanic, it's like, well, I'm a minority, I've got my own issues. Now my issues have been suppressed. Now I want to support, but I came in and, resonate. So there's so many different viewpoints. And what I've been diving into, and I can link the video in here in just a second, but I keep repeating this, but if you've not read this book, okay, holding it up right here, if it's showing up, I'm not sure if there's a feedback, but it's called White Fragility, okay? Why is it so hard for us to have this conversation? Because what this is saying is, why is it so hard for white people to have the conversation? But I think it relates directly to the Black community as well, because what you will see if you're trying to avoid this is that there will be some people in the Black community that are just tired. So it's the tiredness of trying to explain, 400 plus years of oppression, trying to explain how the ancestry of the Black community, from instillment of slavery to even the abolishment of slavery. And I gave this reference on my IG live yesterday, is this, imagine this, okay? You have a head start of people that have been reading, writing, doing deals, doing business, making money, doing all this stuff. And then you have a group of people that they've taken from their land and brought them over here. I'm getting to a point here. Brought them over here. And then you say, oh, you're free and you're released. They can't read, can't write, don't know how to negotiate, don't know how to find a job, don't know how to do anything but except love on their family and know that basic principle of how to take care of their own, right? How to maybe find food and cultivate food. That's where you see a lot of early Black businesses going into food and the cooking and the development and whatnot, okay? And then you have a select few that had an opportunity to invent and start things and do that stuff, but that was never highlighted, right? Then we move into slavery, we move into the civil rights movement, and we move into that era of the 40s, 50s, 60s. And it took rioting, it took all these things for just a simple Civil Rights Act of 1968 to happen, right? So again, everyone thought that was great. I'm getting to a point. The Civil Rights Act of 1968 is saying that, oh, wow, everything is great. But what is happening? There's laws and written things in this Constitution that are subtly put there to allow a certain group to be exempt, right? What is essentially saying is that the white community leadership during that time is saying that they're not going to know what this means because we trained them not to read and to write and to understand, right? So there's always been something subtly there. And why I'm telling you this is because I think the Black community understands our history very well, but I don't think the white community understands where this stems from and how this has come back up in the 21st century. It's because it's always been there. So we wonder why, well, why aren't the Black folks getting, equal justice? It's because certain laws are written in place. So then there's this subconscious, well, why in the world was he on the ground? Why in the world did they stop him? Well, why was he running in the street? Well, he must have been doing something. He couldn't have been just running. He couldn't have been just trying to, buy some food for his family with $20, and maybe he, that's the $20 that he had, and maybe it was counterfeit, maybe it wasn't. He was just trying to do something decent for another cause. But yet what we see is that, again, it's always this other question. But when there's this white community, obviously, that just say you have a frat guy. We've all experienced that in college. Just say you have somebody that gets pulled over, white frat guy. I don't want to be, I'm just being straightforward here and blunt. And, oh, it must have been a miscommunication. He didn't mean to do that. Well, he gets that way sometimes. It's kind of racial when he gets drunk. Like it's always this like extra excuse of like, well, that can't be that situation, right? So I don't think we understand the mentality of the first thought that comes in our mind. And the first thought that comes in our mind, we have to be careful with those thoughts because I think both parties do that, right? I do that as well sometimes. Like that's the first thought is that, even as a Black male, the first thought for me initially is, okay, well, this is like overt racism. But a lot of the times I have to stop myself and I have to balance the two as if, there does need to be justice. What is really happening? What's going on with the situation? And then you take it from there. So I'm not going to lecture too much, but I want to open up more questions, obviously. And I want to have some teaching points in there. And I want to open up questions to anyone that's listening. If you're watching on a replay, like still comment and we'll follow up. Or you can reach out to us afterwards if it's the recording, right? So I'm going to bounce this back to you, Christina. And kind of what do you think about what I just talked about? Like what came on your mind?
Yeah, so I feel like for me, it's good to hear from your perspective, like just that history and everything that leads up to eventually today, how that all has threaded through history to, like you said, it's all weaved in subconsciously into society. And like, I think the most important thing that I heard was to really monitor your thoughts, right? Like thinking about, especially what I just said before about what are the assumptions that we're making? What are the questions we're asking people? Because we all have our individual things that get in the way, or we have our preconceptions. So how can we dismantle that to see more of the truth? Whenever you were talking before, I got a lot of like intuitive like messages, and one of them was like seeing things clearly. Like we need to be pulling the wool off of our eyes to be seeing things from a more clear perspective. And I feel like what you just explained was lifting that veil for a lot of people, and for me included. And I'm just very passionate about this. I feel like these conversations are what helps both our communities to merge and to be able to understand on a deeper level that everybody has a different experience. And I just think it's super important to highlight that. Just like, where does your mind go when certain things happen?
Yeah.
And being able to break down those barriers. And I think you were talking about that. I didn't read White Fragility, but you talked about that. That was one of the 5 points about your defensiveness, right? Like, what is your first defense?
Yeah.
And I think that when we address those things, that we can see from a clearer perspective.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that's a great pivot, because I think a lot of people are wondering, well, what steps? So I have my notebook here, and I'm going to go over, you're probably wondering, well, what are the 5 steps, guys? Like, you can't be having side conversations and not let us in. So I'm going to go into really quickly, what the 5 steps are. And the first chapter in this book is talking about, why is it so hard to have the conversation? And this ties into acknowledgement, right? And I'm speaking to my white community, but I'm also speaking to anyone who's listening right now, because it's important for us that can't directly resonate to say, well, what is happening now in the Black community is saying, well, they need to learn their own stuff. I can't help them with that. That doesn't help our whole cause, right? So why am I, as an African-American male, trying to show where the resources are? It's because we all need to learn, right? So the first chapter is talking about that. And what it's saying is there's these 5 steps of why it's so hard for the white community to talk about this. Why is it so uncomfortable? And I think that is the biggest thing that's going on now. And so I want to kind of go over these really quick, and it's very, very simplistic. If you want to take notes, if you want to jot it down, if you want to replay, whatever you want to do. Okay. The first thing is simply acknowledgement. All these things are acknowledgement. Okay. And I want to really go over the acknowledgement, the fact that you do have privilege if you are of white descendants. Okay. Well, Bryan, there's always this rebuttal, right? And the rebuttal is typically, I think Christina maybe had this too. It's like, well, I struggled. I had to fight for everything. There was a time where I didn't have money. There was a time where, I had to really navigate who I was. I'm like, okay, that's great. But you got to think of not us as educated people that are maybe listening to this, but other people that are, if you were put on a chopping block and there was a Black woman and Christina, what kind of story would immediately go within the mind of a person? It doesn't matter if they're educated. It doesn't matter if they are raised in the field. It doesn't matter of rural Nebraska. It doesn't matter. What is the first thing that's going to go through their heads? Are they going to immediately say that Christina struggled? Or they are going to immediately go to that her Black counterpart struggled, right? And I think we have to get to the bare roots of that and remove ourselves about how we process this. Like, no, I don't think that way. That's not, the majority of society thinks very, very, exactly, like plain and clear, who struggled, right? So that's what I think we have to break that barrier, and it's ingrained for so many years. So acknowledgement that there is white privilege and there is a thing such as, because it just is, okay? It's been ingrained from history. So the first thing is, I'm going to speak as we. So I'm going to speak as if I were a white person, okay? Because the author is white and she's speaking in that manner. We all have opinions that are emotionally charged, but can be uninformed. So imagine the white community, and I know this happens, just say a corporation. Imagine a corporation of all white men talking about how they should make the thing better, and somebody brings up racism. What do you think that conversation is going to look like? Probably not very well. There's going to be a mixture of, oh, let's move on, meeting adjourned, whatever it might be. Like, there's going to be this immediately suppressed, we don't need to talk about this. This doesn't affect us. There might be somebody that blasts out, well, those in words, whatever, like, we shouldn't have to do, like, there's going to be that person in the room. And then there's going to be a person that's going to be silent. Okay, because they don't want to offend. They're like, well, I need to keep my job, but I don't believe that. I was raised differently. Maybe I'm Jewish, but I look like I'm white. It's just this combativeness of going back and forth, and it's very emotionally charged. So there's this defensiveness, right, of what's going on. It's like, well, I'm not racist. Like, I have black. It's immediately this like emotionally charged thing, but there's no information, keyword. You're so emotionally charged, but yet you're uninformed. It's like, why don't we reverse that and seek more information before we start lashing out in emotions, right? The second is, I'm seen as unique and I'm unaffected by society and culture. Okay. I broke these words down into white privilege, and it was saying that when the white person is being called white, typically, it makes them feel uncomfortable, because they don't consider themselves a part of a race. It's just, well, I am who I am. Everyone else is a minority. So it's that I'm unique. We're still superior. Everyone else is a minority. And this race thing, because I don't have a race, I'm not affected, right, by society and culture. So that's where you see the step back of like, this doesn't involve me. I don't want to talk about it. I can go about my life, but yet it does involve you, because you're not, then again, you have to be deeply rooted in what am I doing? Like Christina said, like, why am I feeling this way? What is going on? Why do I feel this way? If I have people that I love and care about that are of this community, yeah, it's just that.
And the silence is still a choice, like you said.
Exactly.
That really come across strong. It's like, all right, that's still a choice.
Yep. Yep. Everything's a choice. Everything that you're doing is a choice. The third, I'm going to run through these because I don't want to be on here lecturing. I want to make this a conversation with Christina and get her viewpoint and bring other people in. So if you guys have questions, go ahead and put it in the comments. Again, keep liking, keep sharing this on your page. That, blast it out to more and more people. The third, if we don't see it, it does not exist. If I don't see this, it does not exist, right? I can remove myself, but one of my good friends and fellow coaches, he's actually on the front lines in California, and I truly respect him for this. He is a white male. His name is Nick Tillier. And he spoke something on his live yesterday, and he said that literally, he said, I am tired. And he had to check himself. He said, I've been protesting for 3 or 4 or 5 days. I'm tired. But he said, I acknowledge that now I feel just a minute feeling of what it feels like to be in the African American community, to where you can't remove your blackness. You can't remove your ethnicity. You can't just go home and go to sleep. He was like, I have a choice that I can leave this at any moment. Now he's saying, I know what it feels like when the African American community, or any minority, but specifically in this situation, when I'm tired, when you have to wake up every day and just imagine that you're a part of this, and then you have to go to work. Imagine if you have to turn on a Zoom call and you're the only African American on the Zoom call. Like, everyone else is fine, but it never comes up. And it's so hard for leadership. And I think it's so important for leadership, which is predominantly white males, right? Leadership, to open up the conversation and willing to be vulnerable to say, hey, I know we've got one of our, even if it's got to be a side conversation, what does that look like to open that up to say, hey, I want to understand. Again, the question, Not how do you feel? Are you okay? What's going on? I want to understand. Teach me. Tell me what you feel, right? So courageous conversations. Yeah, love it. Love it. That's my boy Artman. The fourth, really quick, we use our reactions as a way out. So the reactions are essentially, well, I have a black friend. I am not racist. Like that statement alone, I'm not racist, needs to be stopped. Like that's not an excuse to be an out, is I'm not racist.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not racist. You know that. No, I don't know that. Right. So the fifth, we don't understand racism as a system. We don't understand racism as a system. Again, the we is talking as the white person, the white male, the white female. We don't understand that. This is systemically been put in our society, as I talked about historically, for years, decades, centuries, that there are things in place that have been ingrained to where the African American community. Okay, I had a conversation really quick with one of my good friends yesterday, and we were talking about an example. Okay, why is it that when an African American, when they're trying to get out of the projects, right? And I'm gonna get to a point of leadership as well, because we have a lot of well-educated people of how to have these conversations in workplaces and leadership. And I'm gonna open up again to Christina. So this is the fifth point. Why in the world is that when the African American tries to get a loan for a home in a well-established neighborhood, that
Yeah.
that neighborhood's depreciation might slightly go down, so they might not get approved for the loan, right?
Yeah,
So,
that the redlining. Yep.
yeah, exactly. Redlining. It's one of
Well,
those.
you said,
Yeah, go ahead, Christina. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, there, like you said, it's a system, and I've been educated on this through, my good friend Ellen, and she started talking about that the other day, and I'm like, I feel so naive. I'm like, I didn't even know that was a thing. So
Mm-hmm.
I think back to what you said, it's like it is so systemic, and sometimes it's subtle, and sometimes it's just blatant, but it pervades our entire society. And like you said, even in the Constitution, there's so many things that that are restrictive in that way. So well, what I got from those 5 points really was like, we need to lean in and not bow out, right? We need to be having these conversations, getting uncomfortable, looking within ourselves, and coming to some kind of truth about like what's really happening here, instead of being like, oh, it doesn't affect me. Nope.
Yeah.
I think that that's the biggest takeaway that I feel like from this conversation, that's so important.
Yeah. And I think that can be translated into actionable steps, right? So, like, what does it
Yeah.
look like to lean in? Continuously asking these questions. So, I think the biggest thing that I've tried to recommend or suggest, because again, I don't want to be the teacher. I don't want to have to teach. I think as grown folks, there's a responsibility, right, to do your due diligence and your own homework in this. And I can't tell people exactly how to support. But what I will say is that you can use your creative expression to show support in a way that you are open to learn if you don't know, but also that how in the world, I'm gonna give you some examples. Okay, I've seen some people say that, hey, I've never really supported a Black business. How if I have a friend with a Black owned business, how in the world can I promote them in kind of like shout them out, and not as a Black owned business? Again, I want to acknowledge my Black friend for his Black owned business. No, that's not. You're not getting the point. It is a Black owned business. You know that, but you're simply building that person up. Second thing.
I've been promoting you since day one.
And you haven't, exactly. See? Exactly. And I'm going to look through some comments and questions.
I just on your podcast.
Yes,
Your
yes,
podcast,
yeah. And again, you never said that, or never probably even thought that I'm going to support Bryan because he's a Black owned business owner or whatever. My business is very much diverse, guys. So just because I'm African American male, yeah, it might look as a Black owned business, but I service so many different people. But what I will say is that that is the second way, is that you can build somebody up that you know that has a business. Third is that you can, if you have money, like contribute, you know. I think that is again, it might feel like a slap in the face, but a lot of times the African American community, or the things that are necessary, the lawyers that are needed, the bailouts that are needed, the money that's needed in the system to put in the right place. Just think of how many people have gotten off simply from the fact of money. Look at our presidential election. How many people were well qualified but didn't have the funds to put inside of their campaign,
Yeah.
right? So people try to avoid money, but money is necessary to be weaved and ingrained into our society. That's why I like to talk about money a lot, is because I don't think the money mindset is there from a lot of different entities or parties, because it's necessary. Okay. So those are kind of my ways. Go ahead, Christina. I know you're about to say something.
I was just going to say, I like this Juan Branch. He said a comment about, yes, tough conversations. That was actually my next point.
Yeah.
To kind of add on to your points about like, what are our next action steps? I think it's having those conversations. My friend Tanya Russell, if you want to go on my Facebook page, she wrote an amazing article about having those tough conversations with your family. So again, it starts with us in our microcosm, and then that's how we create change. So I love that comment, Juan. Thank you for saying that. So again, my friend Tanya wrote that. You can go on my Facebook and look at that. I think it was a Business Insider article that she wrote with some direction on that.
Exactly. And I've had conversations, Christina, as well this week about that, is that, how in the world, because the conversations look differently. I'll tell you very straightforward and honest that there are subtleties in, the microcosm that you're talking about that are talking against what we're trying to change. Meaning the African American dinner table might look like the subtle jab at the white community, that, it just comes out, right? So we have to really watch those things and check those things. And I think it happens as well in the white microcosm community, as that, even the mannerisms and behavior, it's like, well, you're dressing black, or you're acting black, or turn down that music. I don't want to listen to that mess. But it's ingrained into our culture. So what are we saying? So in these microcosms of our dinner tables, as Juan was saying, and he's putting quotation as there, and I know what he means by that, the white community's dinner table.
Yeah.
Right? How in the world can that happen at that dinner table? And I think it starts with going and standing firm in your beliefs. So I know for some people, especially in the millennial generation, they have families and moms and dads and grandparents that might be racist, that might still have this ingrained in them. How do you check that? And I think it's number one, by action, that you show the way, because you can't change necessarily people that have been ingrained for 30, 40, 50 years, but it's also to get them to understand a different viewpoint, ask different questions. Hey, grandpa, hey, mom, hey, dad, why, can you tell me experience? Like, why do you have so much hatred? Like, why did you say that word? Like, why did you do that? Why did you do this? And once you understand somebody's experience, they might tell you, they might not, that's their choice, but they might say, well, there was this one time this black kid like got on my nerves and it just came out. Oh, okay. Well, I just heard my friend say it and I thought it was just another word. Oh, so you didn't know. Oh, well, I just thought like that's what they wanted to be called, like black, African American, I don't know, like, oh, so you don't understand the definitions, right? So it's understanding the story behind why people are thinking and doing these things. I think, Juan, to answer your question, I think that's how the conversations have to go on both parties. Because we have to change as African American community as well, in my opinion, of how we are viewing this. Because what I'm seeing is there are a lot of my counterparts that will not do this conversation. Just be straight up honest with you. They're so frustrated and angry that they will not have this conversation, and they're not required to, and they think that it's not necessary. that we've been oppressed for so long that we shouldn't have to do this. We shouldn't have to even initiate this conversation, right? But I've decided to take a different role. Priscilla, what is she saying?
Donating to causes funds all the time, not just when there's a big push right now. It put it in throughout the year, and not just to say you're supporting people of color, sharing that these funds need resources is a lot different than wanting public ballot. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I'm gonna open this up to you, Christina, now. Obviously
I
we
love these.
obviously we came from various backgrounds, but also what I will say is that you've had a different experience in the corporation world, right? We both came from kind of the corporate institutionalized setting, meaning we both went to grad school. We both injected ourselves into pharmacy. What did you ever feel a sense of like prejudice towards you ever? Did you ever like service, and this is being very vulnerable, did you ever have to service like a person that was like maybe on Medicaid or didn't have it or lashed out, and there was this inkling of like, you know, what is going on? Because I think that's going on as well, is that people still have to go to work, right? People are still ingrained in this culture and still have things that are being done. And I think it needs to change. I think they don't have the luxury to be entrepreneurs and have their voice heard. So yeah, like I've experienced that. I don't know if that question made sense or the conversation.
So yeah, can you like narrow it down to what's the question?
Yeah. So essentially, for example, if you were still in the pharmacy direct setting, right? And you know you have some sense of privilege, but your Black counterpart that might replace you. Just say, for instance, guys, there's a pharmacist, there's a staff pharmacist, and there's a pharmacy manager. Just say you were the pharmacy manager, right? And I think we talked about this. And then the staff pharmacist comes in and it's your friend who's Black, right? Would you have an inkling of any type of trying to support that person? And maybe I can talk about this from my experience. Like, how would you support?
So I feel like I've never had that type of experience before.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't really speak on that, to be honest. I thought you were talking more from like the patient perspective of how they saw me as a practitioner, or was that not what you were saying?
You can go into that too. I think that's good too, because that is happening, obviously, the care of certain people.
Yeah, I think that I had a residency program. I did a residency in Brooklyn, and it was my demographic was primarily Caribbean women. And I remember I had to learn a lot about their culture and their food because I was teaching diabetes classes and I didn't know. So I think my experiences have really, like I said, I'm really grateful for them because it's allowed me to see those different perspectives on, even just culturally and the different ways that a pharmacist, really needs to be aware of those different, cultural experiences and how they see me, and they might say like, you don't understand my culture. Yeah. So it's like you said, I think the whole thing that I'm really getting from our conversation is really seek to understand first. Yeah. That's so huge. Not putting the blinders on or being like, oh, it doesn't affect me, and like, or they should come to nothing like that. It needs to be, how can I serve these people in the best of my ability as a practitioner, as a friend, whatever that looks like.
Yeah. Wow.
That makes sense.
That's good. No, that makes perfect sense. I think the last part that you said was seek understanding. And a lot of people can't directly relate with the healthcare profession, but I think that can relate to any corporation, any workplace that you may be in, navigating, diversity and inclusion, right? Because that can be, put into place, but I don't think it's ever talked about how in the world do we handle this? And I think, number one, to drive the conversation, it starts from the top, but it also starts from the bottom. So for instance, guys, just say, I like to make healthcare references. Just say there's a nurse that has experienced some sense of a Black nurse, for instance, because I've heard this story before. Just say there's a Black nurse that experiences that a white community might get more care, like they're seeing it. You know, a white family is coming in, they're getting more care, they're getting more attention. Hey, we need to be seen right now. They're getting more attention. And then you have somebody that can't pay for something, right? Exactly. Taking a genuine interest in learning cultural differences can improve quality of care immensely. Yeah. So asking specific.
You're on point. I love his comment.
Yeah. And Artman is actually Haitian. So I knew that was going to resonate with him being like, you know, from the so, you know.
I do know some words in Haitian, actually. So that means hi, how are you, I think.
Oh my goodness. So yeah, I do believe that needs to happen, is seek understanding, but I think the conversation's at the top. And I think that's where a lot of things need to change. And that's what we're trying to figure out, is that how do we change leadership and what leadership looks like? Because for instance, if a Black nurse comes to the CEO of the hospital and says, this is going on, and the CEO is not culturally competent or socially aware, or has any sense of acknowledgement that this is real, then that is not going to happen, right? That conversation is going to be suppressed, it's going to be debunked. So again, the qualification of who's leading needs to be very much different from these boards, from the injection into, for instance, I'm trying to get into the country clubs. That's why I'm a member of a golf club. I'm trying to get into these conversations, into these boards, into these rooms, because if it's not brought up, then there's not going to be a change in leadership. Because again, where does that come from? Oh, we've exempt ourselves from everything. That's them. They're dealing with that. They're seeing something that's not there, but it's there. So that's why nothing's getting changed, is because we have leadership that is not able to be culturally competent enough to have the tough conversations that are necessary. So guys, if you are in some sense of feeling like, if you see something, say something. If you can't directly relate, obviously, that's where you can use privilege, okay? That is where you can use privilege. If you are a white male or a white female and you see something and you care, and you see it in your workplace, if you see it in your system, if you see it in your Rotary Club or whatever you're going on, your sorority, like, bring up the conversation. Because why I'm posting so much of, I guess, the white community stepping up is because we've been saying this as the Black community for so long, right? But if it's coming from one of your own, don't you think maybe that conversation might be taken a little bit more seriously, unfortunately?
And that's why we're here today, because it needs to be said.
Exactly. Yep. So why I wanted to have this conversation, and I'll open it back up to you, Christina. Why I wanted to have this conversation is because what I've been seeing is there's a lot of Black on Black conversations, white on white conversations. The only time I see it coming together, and I've seen some well done church conversation. T.D. Jakes and Carl Lentz, I think recently, Stephen Furtick, and I can't get the other guy's name, but that's the only time I'm seeing this. So I wanted to open up this conversation because there's, again, bias if you're having that one conversation and you're not including the other party. Well, what should we do as our community? It's like, well, there's a whole other community that has no idea what to do. So we need to bridge this conversation, i.e., why the title of this is what it is. What did Stephen say?
What we got?
I think.
Yeah, we have any.
I think Christina nailed the point. Speak to understand, incredibly difficult.
Oh, my friend Ellen is watching. Hi, Ellen.
So I want to open this up to our audience. I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that will be a wonderful thing, because as you see, guys, we kind of warmed you up, maybe, hopefully, that we're willing to be vulnerable during this time. If you've wanted to ask a question about what to do specifically, if you've had an experience that you've gone through currently, if you've suppressed, if you've expressed in anger, if whatever it might be, if you've had certain thoughts, we're both coaches. Christina is an energy healer, transformation coach, dives very deeply into the mind. Myself as a life coach, like we are here to support you, and that's why I wanted to have this conversation with Christina. Uh, so I'll open it up really quickly and just put it in the comments. We'll, kind of listen here. And then if we don't see anything, we'll kind of wrap this up just a little bit and have our final thoughts, if that's okay with you, Christina.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah. So while this is going on, do you have any teaching points, Christina, that you would like to maybe throw in?
Yeah. So now that my girl Snelly just joined, Ellen, she's a great friend of mine. I talked to her the other day, and one of the things that she said, which I thought was a really powerful point to bring up, and it was kind of going with the conversation of what, having that conversation with your family was disrupting conversation, not just sitting back and not saying anything, actually saying, hey, that makes me uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to say that that to the person, and then opening up the conversation, like what you said before, that tip that you gave around, like, well, why do you think that way? So I think that's another point I wanted to bring up, was like shutting it down and just disrupting that conversation if that's something that's occurring in your reality. So
Yeah. Okay. What would you coach in an energy space? Because she's a spiritual healer, energy healer, does a lot of different works with her clients. How would you say, from a perspective of trying to just remove this stress, right? How would you maybe go about this now, having sought more understanding? If someone came to you with this stress, obviously there's people that are stressed on here, maybe. What would that look like, if you can express that maybe?
oh man, I have so many tools for stress. I feel like and this is something that we can talk about too, that things, again, that I'm just learning about, that I didn't even learn in pharmacy school, but talking about allostatic load. And my friend Tanya, again, posted an article about that in the New York Times, talking about how there's extra wear and tear on people because of the fact that they are dealing with racism and discrimination. So there's been studies that show people of color have a higher allostatic load and an increased risk for so many different diseases, just because, like, taking away all other factors just because of that, because they have to deal with that every day. So I think that anything you can do to, decrease the inflammation and the stress, meditating, going for walks. I'm learning it's called havening technique, which, I've definitely looked at that. It actually helps to calm your body down in times of trauma and stress. There's so much that I could go into about that, but I think the number one thing is just knowing yourself and what tools work best for you. Is there's so many out there.
How do you spell that? I'm going to put that in the comments. Havening.
Havening. So it's like the safe haven. So HAVENING, havening. Yeah. I'm taking a course right now on it, and it's supposed to help with build resilience with trauma. So it helps to induce delta wave brain states to really like calm you down. And there's different parts of the body that you can touch to induce that state.
So it goes maybe into like a tapping mechanism, if you guys aren't familiar.
Exactly. So it's called it's a psychosensory therapy, which is exactly, like tapping. But tapping doesn't induce the delta wave brain state, because you could tap anywhere, but these specific parts have been shown to induce that delta wave brain state and actually remove trauma chemically. So yeah, it's really interesting.
Wow. I think hopefully maybe just being on here, what I think maybe might be a solution too, is for people to open up the conversation, right? There's so many thoughts that are going on in each community's head that it's stressing the white person out because they don't know what to say. It's stressing the black person out because they don't know if they're going to lash out in anger if they have a conversation with their white counterparts. So I think maybe even releasing the stress of thinking, well, what if, and just opening up the conversation and saying, hey, I don't know. right? Because this whole situation is stressing people out. And all I'm hearing is, this is heavy on my heart. I can't do this right now. And it's allowing people not to, push forward. Obviously, we're going through a pandemic, and it doesn't even seem like that anymore, because now we're going through a whole social justice movement, right? So,
Yeah, yeah.
you
Like
know,
COVID, what was that?
COVID, oh yeah, that's still around. So it's, I think, opening up the conversation too, and going, if you have any questions for Christina, obviously you can reach out to her specifically for specific deep dives into meditative techniques, tapping techniques, and the havening technique that she's going through now, and many others. But yeah, I don't see any more questions, and it's been right around in that hour standpoint. So yeah, I want to kind of, I guess, adjourn this or close it out in a way that maybe we can have each of our last points and maybe some takeaways for people. And I think hopefully this helped people this morning to maybe ease the rest of the day. If you're rewatching, thank you so much. Keep sharing, keep liking, allow more people to see this, share it on all platforms, and I'm going to make something cool, I guess, and post it on other platforms as well. So, Christina, ladies first. I'll let you lead the way and kind of maybe some last thoughts that you have.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you, everybody who watched the whole time through. I think that this is one of the most important Facebook Lives and conversations that I've ever had. And I just appreciate the openness. I think that what I would say is to really, examine your heart, open your heart, and operate, instead of moving back in fear, really lean into how can I help? And there are so many ways we've listed that you can help, support this cause, support this movement. And it really begins with the individual. So that's what I would say, to really just examine your own heart.
I love it. I'm going to take our takeaways as number one, the key word is being just acknowledgement from both parties. I think that is huge. Second is from the book, and it gives 3 ways, and it's saying that you must have a sustained study, struggle, and focus. Okay, what that means is essentially that we all must do our due diligence in studying up on this, because we think that racism has been suppressed in our elders, in our generation, in our ancestry, right? But we can't even have a healthy conversation without jumping on live feeling uncomfortable, right? Second is a struggle. We have to understand that it's going to be painful going through this, and through that pain we can grow and we can learn and we can welcome it in. I know I've been posting stuff on my IG stories, and a lot of videos that it's hard for them to watch. It's hard. Some people couldn't even watch the George Floyd, the Ahmaud Arbery, but it's necessary to see that stuff, because we have to learn that this is going to be a struggle. And as we know, Christina, any struggle, whether it be business, life, relationships, anything that you're fighting for, you're going to come out on the other end, even if it's not what you thought, you're going to have learned something. So we have to understand that you can't avoid this struggle. I don't care if you're directly related or affected or you're not, because what I've seen is that people have tried to suppress this and say that, oh, well, I'm just going to continue promote my business and go doing about what I want to do and whatever. And now they're getting backlash. So now your brand is affected, even though you didn't mean to do anything, right? Now your personal brand is affected, because now people see that you don't have human empathy and compassion, right? Yeah. So you have to understand that even if you aren't directly related to this, you are, okay? And you can do your due diligence. And the third point is focus. I think that, again, we can't avoid this, but we have to understand that we can do something, and in that you can creatively express in whatever way you feel necessary. If you feel like you can donate, great. My boy Artman has an amazing video that he posted on his IGTV talking about 3 ways that you can support from your phone, right? You don't want to be on the front lines, great. If you don't want to be, on video, great. Like you said, your friend wrote an article. Like, there's a way to show your stance, right? And you can focus on that by doing your creative work. I don't know if you're going to say something, Christina.
Yeah, I was just going to say, can you post in the comments those ways to donate, or maybe Arkman can. I would love to do that.
Yeah. So if you guys have any ways that you can donate to any causes specifically, I know there's a lot of bails. I know there's a lot of funds specifically for lawyer fees, attorney fees, all that kind of stuff. If it's a financial, if there's a way for the biggest way, and I know Artman's going to get on me this because he is a councilman in Carrollton, Texas. I'm speaking that into existence, Artman. Um, Vote. Like, there's no other way that we can make some type of change in leadership if we do not play our part and go to meetings and or say, hey, I can't go to this meeting, but hey, what are you going to do? How can we create change? All that kind of stuff. I hope White Allies, brands, organizations keep the work up beyond this moment, reorganize their brand strategies if necessary. Yeah.
We need to talk. I feel like I have so much that I want to ask you and talk about, so I might private message you.
Yeah. Reach out to Art. He has amazing combo and thoughts. But I agree. You know, me and him have our Wednesday wisdom walks here in Dallas, and we talk about these things. And what he's saying there essentially is white brands, white allies. Like, you think that this isn't going to shape business, but it is. We saw what happened when, I don't know if you guys know, but the San Francisco 49ers posted a Black entity yesterday and said that we support Black lives that matter. And yeah, there might be that, oh, well, actually the 49ers supported Colin Kaepernick, but they didn't at the same time. So what is happening now that we're seeing is trying to save face or go along like under the radar that they're supporting. But ultimately that's money driven, right? They want to keep their fans. Their fans are a part of the movement. So they want to keep their fans. They want to have them buy merch when the NFL opens back up. Like, all these different things, these layers that are being peeled back. So again, there's going to have to be reorganization around brand strategies. I think Nike does it well. Like, that's why people are gravitating towards certain brands, is because they're like, wow, they stand for something, right? So the companies that aren't doing that, that aren't standing for something, that's saying, hey, we're removing our contribution from your campaign. Hey, we're removing our contribution from this and from that and from this and from that, is because we stand for something, and we stand behind the people that support us and that fund us to actually stay public in the stock market and not go bankrupt, right? That's where this has to go. So, Artman just posted something there.
Thank you.
Recommending categories. Yep. Yep. So those are all great. Specifically, guys, if you have any more, yeah, I don't think there's any more questions. We can go on this conversation forever, but I want to make sure that, I want to make sure I respect people's time and, make sure that this can continue. Maybe we'll do a part 2, or I'll have somebody else on, or maybe we'll have multiple people on, because now we're on Zoom, so we can have multiple people conversing. And this is a start, guys. This is a start for us to all understand. And it's crazy to think that our generation is having to be the pillars, right? Because we look at pillars in the community in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s and whatnot that fought for these rights. But now we're like, oh man, this is on us now. Right? And a lot of us are scared because we're like, I didn't ask for this, but you are a leader in your own right. If you have credentials, if you have a family, if you have a leadership position at work, if you are leading your friend group, I don't care what you're leading, you're a leader in your own right, and you have an obligation, in my opinion, to step up in this time, and you can do that and creatively express in many different ways. So, Christina, thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, this is amazing, guys. I appreciate each and every one of you that showed up.
Yeah, thanks for all the comments too.
Yeah, comments. When this is done, when we get off of this live, share it out with everybody. Reach out to us if you have any further questions. Give us some feedback as well. Like, I think Christina and I are open for feedback. Obviously, is like, hey, I would have loved this angle of approach, because that could be a part 2, right? Or we could have that discussion elsewhere. Yeah. That being said, appreciate each and every one of you again, and I think we're logging off here. So Let me figure out, this is gonna be really raw and real. How in the world do we log off here? Oh my
Oh
God.
my goodness.
Yeah. So I'm gonna go ahead and try this. If it works, great. I'll see you guys in the next one, okay?